You are listening to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, episode 152, Storytelling on the Fly. In today's episode, we discuss storytelling on the fly. We discuss how to construct a game when you have little to no time to plan. We also discuss how to buy yourself time and make the most of short planning periods. If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me virtually once again, I got Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling pretty good about things here. I know I put a lot of pressure on you to come up with this episode pretty quickly. How'd you do coming up with this on the fly, Josh?
Well, I like to roll with the punches. I understand that we had a plan. I had suggested that we do a specific episode, and that didn't happen. So I threw the plan out, and I just sort of rolled with it. And you'll never know just how much that hurt me, because I won't tell you.
Oh, I know how much it hurts you. And you're going to find out as we talk about this episode today on the Level Up Your Gaming Podcast, where imagination meets
So grab your pencils. No, that's a different episode. Yeah, so we're talking about storytelling on the fly.
Yes. Something that I recently just did because I had to come up with a game pretty quickly. I was trying to work through a much more in-depth game, and I ended up having to pivot really quick, like a couple hours before a game. I'm like, I gotta come up with something else because this is not ready, and I need way more time to work on this. I need to buy myself a couple game sessions here.
Yeah. And that's very important, because it could be any number of things that can cause you to have to come up with a change in your story, in your plot. That could be player driven. That could be like just situational. You could bring in new people, and now you've got something else is going on. A new player joins the table, and it's different. You could have a session that has to start, much earlier, and you don't have everything prepped. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I'm assuming that what you meant here is that if you didn't have to deal with that, you'd have yourself a nice little plan, which in this case we don't have one.
Well, no, I actually mean have sort of a plan. It doesn't have to be fully fleshed out. It doesn't have to be fully documented or anything like that. But when you are creating your story, when you're creating your world, you can give yourself some outs. You can have scenes that have multiple exits. You can have different objects that be interacted with, different ways the situation go. Give options. And having options means that if the players move in a certain direction, or if you have if they throw a wrench at you, that you have the ability to sort of roll with it. Making your scenes flexible is useful if you are prepping for them. If you don't have the time to prep for a scene, have some things that are sort of generic that you can reskin to throw in there, but give yourself options. Plan to have things available.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Again, that's just good GMing 101 is be flexible itself. The problem with storytelling on the fly is you have to identify the depth of your game that you want to tell to be able to have the right plan. Because if your game is going to be a long game, it's a one shot, you don't need to be very flexible. You actually want to be quite rigid to be able to get people through the beats that you have sort of thought about in your head, because all games are a point of inception. So if you say, well, I want people to be to go into a cave and they find some treasure and then they come out of that cave and then they have to fight some bandits. You know, your questions then are, if you're storytelling on the fly, is how do I get them to go to the cave? What are they trying to steal? And then why are there bandits trying to steal the treasure afterwards? Answer those couple of questions, you got yourself a game. Okay. Now the question is, can you get your players to go do those things without being too rigid? And so again, how big of a game do you want here? Do you want the players to walk themselves into it and make the conscious effort? Or do you want to start the players, you're in the cave, and this is why. I'm going to tell you why you're in that cave. So I've given you your motivation. You already know why you're there.
Yeah. On the flip side, you walk them to there, and you're like all excited about your cave adventure. They're going to go and they're going to fight a bunch of stuff inside of a cave. It's going to be great. It's cave time. And Jennifer pulls some dynamite out of her backpack and blows up the cave entrance. And you're like, well, now what?
Well, luckily there's a second cave entrance just to the right.
So my next point on here is know what tools your players have. This is very much know your players, KYP, but it's also know your players' character sheets. Like, players have skills and abilities and items on them, and you should plan accordingly. If they are planning on throwing wrenches at you, if they're planning on making the story, their way, roll with it. Plan to be surprised what they're going to use and how they're going to do things. Players are going to try and bend rules that suit the needs at the time. And it's up to you to, either accept and work with it or find a way around it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got, again, one of the things that you should be doing as a GM, it's good practice, is at the end of a session, you collect all the character sheets. Do not trust the players to take home their character sheets, because that's how you end up with weird things popping up on character sheets that shouldn't be there. Because expenditures for XP and equipment purchasing should be done within the confines of the game itself. And thus, that allows you to know what your players have, also what the capabilities of your players are.
Yeah. Now, key point here, know your players. There are some players that are planning on breaking the system, breaking your story, and there's others that won't. That'll just follow the story that you're giving them, and they'll be happy with it.
That's very much a KYP thing. If you're going to railroad your players into a one-shot story, will they follow along? I have found that most people are more amenable. Actually, I have found that most groups will tend to walk the path that you give them, sort of blindly. I'm not saying that all players do that, but I'm saying that if you don't give them a lot of freedom, they tend not. I have noticed the people I have gamed with tend not to seek out a bunch of freedom. They tend to just kind of follow along, and they're sort of happy to do so. Especially if you're throwing a bunch of monsters in front of them, which brings us to our next point.
Yeah. Prep. In this case, prep encounters. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be monsters, but if you've got some encounters that you don't have to use them. Let's take like a scene that they're coming into, and if they do things a certain way, they could run into these monsters. But if they do things a different way, changes the encounter. Different things may show up. If they are, making a lot of noise, maybe additional monsters show up. If they block certain exits, maybe monsters have to come in from a different way, or they're different monsters. These are all, planning for the party, planning for what your players are going to do. Give yourself options, different exits for your scene. But that also works as social encounters. Giving your players the option to deal with a social encounter different ways because you've planned for it will prevent you from having to go, and make something up immediately. This is all prep work, so you don't have to do so much storytelling on the fly. If you've got this in place, then maybe you don't have to worry about coming up with something right out of your butt.
Again, there's varying degrees of this, because you might have been like, you're sitting at the table and the players are like, yeah, we want you to tell a story for us right now. And you're like, crap, I didn't have anything. Great, guys, thank you. So there's no prep time, or you have very limited prep time. You're dealing with like 10 minutes, something like that. If you know that you're supposed to tell a story, you've been asked to tell a story within like a day, you have a lot more prep time to be able to be like, okay, I want to do these encounters. I want to make sure that if people encounter information, these are the big pieces of information that they need to get. Okay. This is a great way to improve with improv storytelling on the fly. Go back to that episode, because you're going to need it. You're going to need to yes and your way through a lot of things. You're going to need to sort of find personalities for NPCs that weren't there before. You don't have the luxury of kind of building an NPC. You're kind of be embodying the NPC and sharing information as you see fit within the confines of the story. So again, really just depends on how much prep time do you have. So,
and if you got it, use it.
yes.
But that brings us to the second point. Doesn't matter how much prep time you've got, how much your plan is in place. There is going to be a point when you just have to throw that plan right out the window.
Yeah, this episode like 4 or 5 was like best laid plans. This is it. Even if you designed a game for months, you're probably throwing the plan out the window anyways at some point.
Yeah. So at that point, you need to know when that point is. You need to recognize that your plan no longer works, that your players have, completely derailed your story. But there are times when it's only slightly derailed and adjustments could be made to bring it back into focus. That's going to rely on you making those adjustments, making those changes to your world on the fly in the moment, so that your players don't notice that there is a difference.
Yes.
But those are two very different things, because you don't want to just shoehorn your story into a world where it doesn't make any sense anymore. And you don't want to, throw out months and months of work because your players made a decision that you don't like. There are ways to go either way.
The disadvantage of storytelling on the fly is that you are limited in the amusement park that you're presenting your players, because you don't know every ride that you've put into that amusement park yet, and you don't know where the boundaries are for your amusement park. So your players, depending on your group, will test your boundaries, and so you need to know very clearly, well, that's too far outside the realm of this story.
Yeah. Well, and it could be that they head off in a direction that you didn't expect, which is fine. It could be interesting. They could be opening up new opportunities. I've had this happen myself, where we were in an encounter and instead of killing the last guy, they wanted to interview him. And I mean, you've been a murder hobos this entire time. You want to talk to this guy now? Fine. And so, I yes and my way through a conversation, and then I had to call the end of the session because they wanted to go and rescue this guy's kidnapped child that he was being used as leverage to make him be a bandit for these other people. And so I had to come up with a whole new encounter because I just, made stuff up. But the fun part about that is you can have contingencies in place, those encounters that you prepped before, those social interactions you prepped before, just coming up with some sort of generic characters. You can use them. Use them as contingencies to buy yourself some time.
Combat buys you time. Combat buys you a lot of time to think. Okay, it's pretty mindless. It allows you to work through all sorts of problems.
Yeah, and if your players are wandering in a direction that you don't have something planned for, a combat encounter is a great way to give yourself enough time to sort of plan that out, or just, you know, oh, looks like we ran late. I'm going to have to call it now, and then come back the next session with something. Um, Puzzles are also a good idea. Having a couple of puzzles, you know, like a puzzle that you can throw at them uh, out of maybe a couple of puzzles that you have, just so that it doesn't, in situations where combat doesn't make any sense. It's not all the time. You don't necessarily want to just throw a combat encounter in the middle of a situation where, you know, there's no combat encounters, or it just would not fit. So, you know, give yourself a couple of different outs so that you have the time to come back, come up with something. But that may not help either. And going back to my little story about them, you know, interviewing the bandit, let your players take the reins with small parts of the stories. This goes back to that whole yes and thing. They say they want to do a thing, go for it, but give it a twist. Whatever they're going to try and do, add a little onto it, because that, it lets your players know that you value their ideas, that they are able to interact with your world in a way that feels natural to them, that things, that the decisions they make have an impact. But you're still in some sort of control, and you are still, you know, it's not going to be an easy ride no matter what they're doing.
It's the illusion of choice. You give the players enough rope to make it feel like they've got a lot of choices, but the reality is you're sort of just walking them back into the same situation. You don't, you, again, agency is so finite in a game, the more that you think about how much rope you actually give your players to do things, and how, by them not understanding how the story progresses, it effectively means like, did I actually figure it out, or did the GM just walk me to it?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a good part in the D&D movie that's just like that. And, you know, if your players are doing something, like they're coming up with a new spell or an attack or a way they're going to utilize your rules, I think it's important to, if you let them do it, make sure you take note, because now you can turn that back on them. The NPCs can do it too. If the players can do it, the bad guys can do it, and that makes things much more fun.
So yeah. So then, yeah. Again, these are all. I mean, they're just it's good improvisational stuff. You say, understand that the living world is not a statistic.
Static.
Static.
It should be static.
Static. Never mind. I just can't read.
Hey, things change, man. It could have been statistic when you read it. I'm not great with typing. And things do change. They're not always the same way. And I think this is important for knowing that your plans are going to have to change, and you're going to have to adjust whatever story you've got, because unless you're running a one shot, unless you're running a short story that doesn't have, you know, repercussions, actions do. If your players are out there going and doing heroic stuff, saving people, taking out monsters, fighting wars, whatever it is, those things have consequences. The players interacting with the world has consequences, whether it's, you know, renown or social change, or just a city is burned down. Those things change the world, and word gets out. You know, bad guys understand what's going on. Maybe they take more interest in you. I like to think of this with George R.R. Martin. Okay, he's taking forever to write all of his books. He's like the Winds of Winter or whatever he's on right now, and one of the reasons they say he's taking forever is that it's not telling his story. He has created the characters, and the way that they interact with the world, he's trying to make it authentic. And when they interact with the world in a certain way, it changes the story. The story that he may have planned out to begin with is not the one he's going to end with, because the players in his story, it's all in his mind. So, I mean, like, that's just crazy person talk. But
or
your
maybe he's
players at
just
the
playing
table
too
are,
much PlayStation. I don't know.
I don't know. That's fine. Either way, good for him. But yeah, if you can recognize that your players' choices, or what they do, have weight in the world, it gives them that feeling of agency, that feeling of accomplishment. And that's a good thing.
Yes, it does. If you can manage to pull that off in a unplanned game, it makes the game world seem much more impactful, or all your decisions more impactful. Typically, when you storytell on the fly, until you've gotten past that first game session, I wouldn't bother thinking about how your players impact the world, because you need time to figure that out. How that stuff works within a game session. If you can figure that out within a game session and make the world react to them in proportionate ways, I'm gonna say you probably don't need this podcast. Okay, I could learn from you. So
it's just a good thing to think about, that your players' actions have consequences. And in a short session, it may be, in a run up, we didn't know what we were doing. We're just doing this thing. It could be something as simple as how they approach an encounter. Well, now you know that they're going to do that. The bad guys know that that's the way they approach an encounter, and so they plan for that approach on their next encounter.
Again, unless they've gone to advertise it and in though, the reaction is like, even let's say that they're like, we're gonna go into this bandit camp and take out these bandits. Okay, we know there's a bandit camp. We know we're gonna take out these bandits. So we're planning. We plan for a fortnight. Okay, we're gonna George R. R. Martin our way into this plan.
That's way more planning than that they gave us to write this thing. But okay, yeah.
Yes, they're just gonna plan and plan and plan. Okay, they've drawn up the battle plans. They've scoped out the place like crazy. They've done all this. The ways that you could react to that are limited in a way, because unless they have interacted with people through the bandit camp, or unless the bandit camp has actively, unless they catch wind of the players plotting this, okay, like, that has to be feasible for that to be a thing. I mean, if your players are super cautious, they work through this, they work up this plan, then things continue to move as similar at the bandit camp. It is fairly static, is what I'm saying.
Well, and that's where I go into the roll with the punches. When they're like, so you started this world, you've got this story that's going on. Your players have, deviated from that. They've run off the rails, or you're having to come up with stuff on the fly. Take those changes and make them part of the world. Bad guys will change their plans when they get new information. If they don't have new information, they ain't going to change their plans. And that could be a completely different thing. Your plot is going on over there. The plot that you came up with is still happening, and your players are off doing something else. And that could be interesting too.
Again, it's such a tough, like, balancing act here. And again, I think I've talked about this with you before, is that, like, you have to weigh the impact of the information, because as a GM, you are fortunate enough to see all the moving pieces. You know exactly how the information impacts things. You know exactly how the players' actions are impacting your bad guys' plans. but to step into your bad guy's shoes and be like, does he understand how this is working? Does they understand why the players doing this is a problem for them? Or like, do they even take note of what the characters are doing in that town over there? Like it's such a weird system that you end up playing. I tend to let things be far more static as it comes to the bad guy. I think that this is what I've learned from talking with you is I let the bad guys be static because I mean, unless the players are doing such flagrantly crazy things that the bad guy should take notice, it's sort of like, why?
Yeah.
Why change it?
And maybe it's just the games that I've written, the games that I've run, is I put a lot of interaction between my players and the forces that they're fighting against, and the people in charge.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and because of that, there's I like the reoccurring bad guys where you are interacting with NPCs on a regular basis. These are the people that are causing the trouble, and you are, either constantly foiling their plans, or they're one step ahead of you as they're getting their stuff done, and you're chasing them down, trying to get things fixed or stop them. And when you have a situation like that, it's a lot easier to have those interactions mean something, especially if the players deviate and come at it from a different angle, because now that puts your NPCs off their game.
Yep.
Which is interesting, and it's fun for your players to like catch your NPCs off. And if they come back and you can use the things that they've done, that your players have done, against them as well, but only if that information is going back and forth. But you have to plan for that. You have to give those options. You have to make it an option for your players to come up with things on the fly in order for them to be able to come up with that, to make your story more interactive like that.
Yeah. No, I guess that's true. I mean, again, I guess it depends on the weight of the actions that a player takes, and it's always how it is. Really weighty actions deserve reactions. Minor actions, things might not change at all.
Yeah. Well, and the major changes, major actions, they can derail a plot. They can change the whole story, and you should be willing to throw out any prep work that you had, and sort of go in a different direction.
This is true in any game, though. Like that's it's not unique to storytelling on the fly. And storytelling on the fly, again, I think you're thinking, these major changes are likely going to drastically change the story that you are immediately telling your players there. I think in a planned game, even a major change may not, because you probably have a better understanding of the impact that change would have on your world because it's more fleshed out.
Yeah. So if you've got prep, these things aren't going to be as big of an impact. But if you don't have prep, you should have a couple of things in your bag that you can throw at your players so that you can build the world as they come to it. And that's all about, making those adjustments, making the finding out what they're looking for, what they're trying to do, and coming up with the story, 2 steps ahead of where they're at. Having
just gotta stay a little bit ahead of the play.
Yeah, just enough. Having encounters and reskinning them so that they fit whatever environment or whatever story that you've come up with is super useful, because you can just drop stuff in you've already have, lying around in your GM bag and make it a thing.
Haven't we encountered these bandits before? No, these bandits have red cloaks.
Yeah, they're all talking with.
I believe we just talked about Gandalf changing his clothes.
I think that was last week. Yeah, no, and it's important to have some things in place that can give you just that lead time.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I think the last thing to talk about here is make sure that your players don't ever see you sweat.
Have ways out. That's the thing that you need to remember, is that if you're going to GM or storytell on the fly or storytell in general, and the players do something, don't freeze and go, I don't know what to do. Okay, be like, if you need, like, be like, you call an audible, do a bathroom break, fill in stuff, let the players talk amongst themselves while you kind of figure out the next piece. The moment the moment that you lose things, also don't retcon. Do not retcon. Okay? This is where it comes in. Do not retcon. Never retcon in your games. Never, ever, ever retcon in your games. If I give you one piece of advice, do not retcon. Okay? Do not go backwards and go like, oh, I messed up that scene. I needed to tell you this thing. It's different to be like, I forgot to give you a piece of information, which is important. Like, is the grease in the wheels. You need that piece of information. It's pretty critical. Or I described this one thing slightly incorrectly. If you're like, I need to completely redo that whole scene, you've lost everything. You might as well just shut down the game.
Yeah. No, like, if things went poorly, if you think that a scene is just completely, off the rails, and it's over, move forward. Make those adjustments. Find a way to fit that new information or whatever has happened into your story, into your world. And it takes a bit of effort. It takes a bit of practice to do this, but you can make those decisions on the fly in such a way that your players don't notice, that your players don't see that, there isn't ground beneath them. They are just running off the edge of the cliff, and you are just throwing down, boards on nothing, and they just don't see it. If you have some things that are planned in place, or you've got some concepts that are like fleshed out, but you don't have like a story for them to fit in, you can use these things in an effective way to sort of generate a world around your players. Don't fight their decisions. Don't fight if your players are trying to do something weird, something interesting in this game that you're coming up with, or that they're making a decision to do a thing that's sort of off the rails. Don't fight them. Don't attack your players for making bad decisions or making decisions you don't like, decisions that are going to ruin your plot. You can redirect. You can, fix the story in ways that makes their decisions still mean something. But fighting them, retconning, changing what has happened in the past, it's never a good place. You got to move forward.
Yes. That's the best piece of advice I can use. Always go forward. The best way through a problem is to fix it in the future, not fix it in the past. If you forgot, I will go back to things that happened in our investigation series. I was informed that we could no longer continue with a plot because somebody had forgotten to give us a piece of information. And I went, that's terrible. Like, I mean, there's a million ways that you could deliver that piece of information somewhere down the line. Okay. You could have the next person who talks to us just be like, I was there. I saw you burn down the house. You forgot this. Luckily I retrieved it. Okay. I don't care if it's that blatant. Okay. always give just work through the problem.
Yeah. Information can always be found later. Clues, monsters, interactions. If the person they were supposed to talk with was the last town they left without talking to them, and they arrive in the new town, guess who's there?
That person.
It's the person they were supposed to talk with.
Or their cousin, or anybody else who possesses that information, because you know what? It's fungible. It doesn't matter who's got it. Just tell the players the information.
Your world is not static. It exists in a living spectrum and can change based on the decisions your players make. If they go off and run in a different direction, guess what? Your plot's over there too. You can have a little bit of fun with it and give your players some agency to, explore or try new things and take things off the rails. And you can just yes and your way into a story that works.
Yeah. Again, it improv your way to the right solution at that point. Work through your problems, get the players the right information. The only time that you're going to have real trouble is if you've somehow broken continuity with what you've done, and then you've got to then you just have to delay long enough to figure out how to get the continuity back.
Well, that was just a wizard, messing with everybody's memories. No.
Or if you want to have your players kill your big bad guy, and they keep encountering him, and they end up killing him way earlier than you wanted. And you're like, well, that doesn't work because there's a lot more story I want to tell. Well, either have somebody else assume the throne and he becomes the new big bad guy, or perhaps they resurrect the king of the dead. Oh my goodness. I don't know.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Return of the Palpatine.
Yeah. No.
Episode 47.
Oh. So yeah, it's don't fight your players' decisions. Don't try and fix your own mistakes in the past. Move forward. Don't let your players notice that there's, seams around the edge of your game.
Easy.
Just roll with it. Just roll with it. It's fine.
Anything else you want to add to this one, Josh? Anything else you want to add here on the fly?
On the fly? Let me think. I think it's important that we all take a little bit of time to understand our own limitations when coming up with stuff. The more you read, the more you expose yourself to different types of media, the more ideas that you're going to have at your disposal. So, read a book. Go touch grass.
Yep. All good advice. That's going to wrap us up for the week. So if you have story told on the fly, if you have any good tips for storytelling on the fly, let us know. levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. Also, the podcast is on YouTube, so go ahead and smash the like button there. Otherwise, subscribe to the podcast, review it, recommend it to a friend, all those good things. And that'll wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.